Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. Okay, you're in for a treat. For the next 5 episodes, you're going to eavesdrop on a conversation between myself and my friend Lydia Machova from languagementoring.com. And we talk about the principles of language learning. We really take it back to basics, and we talk about all of the most important things you need to know when you learn a language. For a lot of you guys, this will be repetition. You'll have heard a lot of these ideas before. But the thing that I really like about this conversation with Lydia is that we just try to organize it and systematize it so that you've got all of the key things in one place. You are going to almost certainly be reminded of certain things that maybe you already knew, but you're not actually doing. Either way, it's going to serve as a great insight into how Lydia thinks about language learning. And what you'll see during the conversation is that we share a lot of the same approaches and ideas about language learning. So a lot of the things that you hear from Lydia, you will have heard from me before in the past. And the reason that I found this quite interesting during the conversation was that I was kind of able to play devil's advocate a little bit, which gave me the sort of interesting opportunity to almost kind of test my ideas a bit and see how I found myself objecting to things that I agree with, but hear coming from somebody else. So it's very, very interesting. We've broken it down into 5 parts, and each part of the conversation I will release as a separate podcast. I'll tell you what these areas are so that you have an idea of what's coming. We start from the very important principle of taking responsibility for your own learning. This is in part 1. In part 2, we're going to talk about prioritizing what you do and making time for language learning. Part 3 is effective language learning activities. So what do you actually do to learn a language? In part 4 is improving your speaking. And then in part 5 is talking about successful long-term learning. So not just what do you do to learn now, but how do you actually sustain it into the long term so that the language becomes part of your life. If you would like to find out more about Lydia, you can go to her website at languagementoring.com. And then if you search any of the social medias for language mentoring, you will find Lydia. She's got some fantastic content out there herself and also on other people's channels. This is the first time we've done something on I Will Teach You a Language, so I'm super pleased to be able to do that. I've known Lydia for a long time, and it's really great to have the chance to sit down properly and talk to her in such a way that you guys can also listen and benefit from. So, all right then, enough from me. Here is part 1 of my conversation with Lydia Machova. All right then, I am here with my good friend Lydia Machova. Lydia, did I pronounce your name right?
Yes, that was very correct. Thank you.
Very correct. Fantastic. So we are about to embark on a mammoth 5-part series here, where we are going to dive into your approach to language learning, which I think, as we'll discover, is both of our approach to language learning. And we're going to talk about all different kinds of aspects of language learning, and we're really going to look at your experience teaching and mentoring people. And yeah, really looking forward to seeing what we cover. But before we do that, take a second to introduce yourself so that anybody who's listening or watching can get to know you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for having me. First of all, I'm really honored to be speaking about language learning tips on your channel. So I'm Lydia from Slovakia, and I run a website called Language Mentoring, in which I'm trying not to teach anyone a language, because I don't believe in teaching as such, but rather to show people how they can learn a language by themselves. Because I believe this is actually the only way to learn a language, because it takes your own activity and your own ways of trying to find the perfect method for you. And yeah, I'm based in Slovakia. I run this in Slovakia and also internationally. And before that, I used to be a conference interpreter. That was my previous job. So I've always worked with languages professionally. but now I concentrate on just language mentoring.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of you with like Tony Robbins and what was it, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, or was it the President? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I worked like as a conference interpreter for 6 years, and I got to work with some really interesting people. But that's now a thing of the past, because I want to help people learn languages so much more than I just want them to understand each other in conferences. It's my bigger mission now.
Conference interpreting, that could be a whole video conversation by itself, couldn't it? Just it's such a fascinating area, and I think people are really interested. But we're going to stick to language learning here. Now we've been friends for quite some time. We've hung out together in all kinds of places. Where have we hung out before? In Berlin,
Tenerife,
Slovakia,
Brno, Czech Republic.
Oh, yeah. Were you in Iceland for the Polyglot conference?
Yeah, I was there as well. Slovenia.
Yeah,
like 5 or 6 countries. I never realized it. That's
we move in the same circles, and we know each other quite well. But you've never been on the podcast, so I'm happy to finally put that to right that wrong, and just for clarity for everybody watching or listening to this. So this is going to go out on the I Will Teach You a Language podcast, and also on YouTube, and probably on the blog as well, actually. So wherever you prefer to consume your content, it's going to be there.
May I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to steal like 1 second to say hi to all Slovak listeners, because I've told so many people about your podcast. I know there's a lot of people from Slovakia, Czech Republic, and maybe Central Europe listening to this right now or watching. And I just want to say, a lot of people tell me they really love your podcast. Like, they not only get a lot of interesting content and tips, but they really love listening to your voice. And honestly, so many people told me, like, he has such a beautiful British accent, and I love listening to him. And sometimes I listen to his podcast before going to sleep. Like, he has a very soothing voice. So anyway, this is another great benefit of your podcast to your listeners that you might not even know about, right?
And that's very nice to hear. I guess it's the one thing that I can't take any credit for, really. Just
No, but you need to know how to say things nicely. You could be saying them in a very unpleasant tone of voice or whatever. So that's good.
I could be saying it in a very unpleasant tone of voice. That's right. I don't know. Maybe some of that will come out today in our conversation. We'll see. So this is going to be a conversation in 5 parts, and the aim here, what we're going to try to do, is to go through the pillars of how Lydia thinks about languages and helps her students learn languages autonomously. And those 5 things are, Lydia, do you want to give us a kind of 1 sentence of each, just to kind of signpost what we're going to talk about for people?
Sure. So the first part will be about like my most important message that I try to give to people, and that is that you can learn a language by yourself. You just need to know a few things, like have a bit of know-how, but it's really important that you take your learning into your own hands. That's like really, I feel very, very passionate about it, because so many people get this wrong, and that's why they struggle with languages for many, many years.
Cool.
The second thing I would like to talk about is how creating a system can help you enormously on the language learning journey, and how I think it's really, really crucial, because most people think they don't have the time, or if they have it, they don't know how to organize it. So maybe we could talk a bit about that. And then many people ask me, so how do I do it? How do I start learning a language by myself? Especially people who have learned the language before, but so they're not complete beginners, but they don't feel confident in the language. They cannot really use it. They cannot really speak it. So in that case, I have 2 really great topics for them, and that's speaking, how to start listening and reading first, and then speaking, because I think these are the 3 most important parts of learning a language. And then finally, so what does this whole language learning journey means in the long term? How do you make sure that you can learn a language to a level where you feel really confident and you can use it and it will stick? Because we don't want to just spend a few weeks or months learning and then forget it all. So maybe give a few tips on how to really learn languages long term.
Wonderful. So a lot of these themes are going to be familiar territory. And so what I'm looking forward to in this is just to sort of see how you how you personally express and articulate these, because they're really fantastic breakdowns. So without any further ado, let's dive in to the first one. What have you got for us for part one?
Yes. So this is the message. I find it so important to always mention it whenever I speak about language learning and how is it possible that, so some people can learn languages, even so many languages, like so many people we know from the polyglot community, whereas most of the people struggle with languages all their lives, right? And of course, the obvious answer for many people would be, oh, they are so talented. There's a few really lucky, talented people who can do it, and most of us aren't talented, so we will never get it right. And I think this is really, really wrong. And I really believe that everyone can learn a language by themselves. I mean, what do you think about this whole talent issue, Olly? I mean, among polyglots, we usually discuss it as like, they say it about us, but it's not really true, right?
I mean, the way I always think about it is that let's assume for the sake of argument that, I mean, take me. Let's assume that I have some kind of natural talent for language learning. Even if that's true, if you look at how much I have to work still to learn the language, I mean, it is. I don't think people often realize just how much work is involved, even for somebody who is who may be talented at it. So I personally think that there might be 5% which you can account for by talent, but the other 95% is just plain old hard work.
Exactly. But people tend to think of it this way, like, but you have those 5%, right? And I don't have them. I don't have the talent. But if you put it with numbers, like I like this 595. I like to tell people, about 5 to 15 maybe. I mean, depending on how talented someone is. But I don't know about you, but I don't see myself as particularly talented to learn languages. Like, for example, I don't have an ability to hear sounds any better than most people, to differentiate them. My accent is not really great in the languages that I speak, but I don't personally mind because, I'm not striving for perfection anyway. But I think that even people like, I really don't see myself as talented as some people I know who can just hear a few sounds and they repeat them perfectly. Like, that's a wonderful talent for sounds. I don't have it myself.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I sometimes meet people as well who are just extraordinarily gifted, have perfect accents, just seem to speak perfectly. But you're never going to see someone who learns a language without putting in a huge amount of work. And I think for people who say to you, you must have this natural talent, I think if they stood and looked over your shoulder and they saw how much work you put in over time, they would see a very different reality there.
Yeah. Exactly. I like to think of it as if I'm talented in any way, then it's the persistence I can put into my language learning. But then, is persistence a talent, or is it really the result of hard work and some willpower that you exercise?
Yeah. Well, we'll be getting onto that in the next part, so don't give away too much just yet.
Sure. Yeah. So anyway, I think that today we have such amazing opportunities and possibilities to learn languages by ourselves because of the internet. And this is something many people don't realize. Because when you compare it, like someone learning a language back in 1970s, right, or 80s, I mean, if they wanted to learn a language, they needed to find a person who most probably teaches that language and has a lot of resources, and then ask them if they could, lend them some books or give them some recordings of something from a textbook. But you could not really find materials by yourself. But today, you just go on Google. I mean, for any language, you can find grammar charts for Klingon, like anything really. So it's not a question of, oh, there are no resources, or, I don't have the resources to learn. I mean, if people just look at your products, what you offer for language learnings, it's fascinating, how much materials you've created to help people learn. So it's all out there, it's all online, and the question is just how to use it. Right.
So, how do you think about different kinds of materials though? Because a lot of people might think, there's lots of great resources out there for languages, and so what they do is they go and download Duolingo, and that's your language learning resource, right? So, do you group resources in different categories in that way?
Yes, I mean, people always want the easy way out, right? And Duolingo is the easy way out, but it's not really a way out. It's just a way, but it's not a way out of your problem of not knowing the language, because you need resources which I think which guide you through enough of the language material, or then if it's just a part of it, then you need to make sure you have the other areas covered. So what I mean by that, if you go for Duolingo, it will help you learn some words in the language and play around with them, and without any doubt you will learn some words, but it will never make you speak. Duolingo will never teach you how to speak a language because you are not practicing that. And I think this is a very simple principle, but many people don't realize it. You need to practice what you want to learn most. So if my goal in speaking a language, in learning a language, is to speak to native speakers and foreigners and to understand them replying, then I need to concentrate most of all on speaking and listening, right? And Duolingo offers you, some vocabulary, you see something written, but you never really speak. So you need to make sure that the materials you are using are good for the goal you want to achieve. Right.
There's also a difference between, it seems to me that there's a sort of fundamental categorical difference between material in the sense of language material, like input. So, for example, a newspaper or a blog post, or material to read or listen to, and instructional material that is for teaching you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's easy for people to confuse the two, because what's the difference between, for example, a newspaper article in Le Monde
mm-hmm.
and Duolingo? I mean, the fundamental difference is that one is content in the language and the other is actually trying to teach you the language, right? It's like a methodology that is teaching, that is taking you through. And I mean, certainly for me, and this is obviously because, after many years of experience doing this stuff, I have my own way of doing things. So personally, whenever I come across any resource that tries to actually tell me what to do,
mm-hmm.
I say, no way. And I walk away. I don't like that. I don't want you to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
I know what to do. I've got my own method. What I want is actually the raw material, the raw content in the language.
Yeah.
And so that I can actually read and listen to it, so that I can figure out, what's going on and learn. But I guess that's how I think about it. But there is a problem, though, if you get someone who's new to language learning and they don't know what to do. They haven't found their way yet. And so for that person, the raw material is kind of a bit overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the course, the instructional stuff, is pretty attractive because it offers some salvation. It's this is what you're going to do.
Yes, but that's the problem. It looks like it offers a solution, a salvation, but it doesn't really. And many people get discouraged after a few weeks because they've been doing Duolingo every day, and it doesn't really get them far after a few weeks. And their conclusion is, okay, well, language learning is more difficult. It doesn't really work for me. That means I'm not talented, and they go back to the old beliefs again. So I absolutely agree with you. It's important, like if you give people good material and if you show them like how you can use this material in order to learn a language, then that they can use almost any material out there. And this is exactly what I'm trying to teach people, to show them, oh, look, well, you have this text here, and what could you do with it? You could take some vocabulary out of this. You could rewrite it. You could just play around with it a little bit. But of course, you need the material itself to start with.
Yeah. So what about language schools then? Or how do you feel about, how do language schools fit into this? Are you a language school? Like, what's going on? What do you think about language?
I'm not a language school, although if people ask me what I do and I just need a one-sentence explanation, I will say I'm kind of an online language school. But I always add, I don't teach anyone. People learn by themselves, right? And this is very important to me. I think language schools are dangerous in the way that they give the wrong mindset to people. If you want to learn anyone, right? Anyone new to language learning, if someone wants to learn a new language, their most probable solution is to find a language school in the local area, find a good teacher, pay the language school, and then that's it. And this is, I think, a huge problem, because if you think that was your part in this whole thing, and you have now found the perfect teacher to teach you the language, then I say that the person is done before they even finished, because it's not the teacher's role, and it's not in their power to teach you the language. They cannot, as you say, like give you the content, right? They are like the Duolingo. They are like the method that seems to be teaching you, but in fact, you need to work with the material yourself. So I think that it can actually harm people if their only solution, if their only way to learn a language is to just sign up for a language course in a language school or in their company or their work or at university or whatever. If they expect the teacher to do the job, then it's just done. I believe it's impossible.
Yeah, there is like an unhealthy correlation between or unhealthy temptation or misapprehension that the way to learn a language is learned through transmitting knowledge. That a teacher holds the knowledge of the language, and the teacher will pass that knowledge to you, and then you have that knowledge, therefore you can speak. And that's kind of the mentality that a student often takes into a language school. It's this idea that there is some kind of hidden knowledge or that is only available in the mind of the teacher. And then by getting access to that teacher, the teacher will tell me what it is so that I can learn. And that's how to be fair to teachers always do their best. And there are some incredible teachers out there.
Sure.
But there's only so much you can do with a student who turns up and expects knowledge to be transferred in that way, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, even the most enlightened teacher, whether in a language school or not, they will realize that their main task is to get students to actually take ownership of the task of learning themselves, right? Almost to kind of flip the classroom on its head.
Yeah, exactly. But then many people tell me when I have this discussion with them, they will tell me, oh, but you have homework. So homework is the solution. But I don't know how you feel about homework, but I think this word has such a negative connotation with it. Like if you ask people what they don't like about language schools, they will say like, oh, we have homework to do. And they usually do the homework, like half an hour before the next lesson starts.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Or in Starbucks, before, like 10 minutes before the lesson.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that word homework, there's a lot of kind of connotations there on the bottom. I see fundamentally the role of the teacher to be, because any learning doesn't happen when you're in a classroom with a teacher and a bunch of students. Learning happens when you're by yourself and focused.
Exactly.
So I see the ultimate role of the teacher as to be empowering the student to go off and learn by themselves autonomously. So in an ideal situation, what would an ideal lesson look like? I use a lot of coaches for different things in my life. I have coaches. I have a Japanese coach right now, for example. Not a teacher, but a coach. And the reason that I have that coach is because I don't trust myself to do the work I need to do on Japanese in my own time, right? So I have this coach, and what this person does is he kind of just checks in, and we talk about, right, what did you do last week? How was it? And what are we going to do this week to improve things? And the entire focus of the session is, right, when you leave and you're back in your own time, what are you going to do? So it empowers me to take that responsibility. And I think the ultimate goal for any teacher is to do that, because that's how the teacher is going to be able to produce the best results.
Exactly.
The trouble is, that's not what the student's looking for. And the student considers that to be homework, like the kind of peripheral thing that you do, whereas the class time is the main thing, right? It comes from our educational system, how we are taught to think about languages.
But this also has to do with the fact that when the teacher asks you to do most of the work outside of the lesson, you kind of think like, hey, but I'm paying you to do the job. Why should I do it by myself, right? Because you feel you're paying the teacher quite a lot, let's say, for the course. And we tend to think of it like, okay, so how many lessons with the teacher do I get for this amount of money? And people decide which course to take depending on, but you have longer lessons with this teacher, and this teacher is a native speaker, etc. So I think when people sign up for a language school, a language class, they usually tend to think of the value of this course by spending time with the teacher, because the teacher is imparting knowledge on you. And that's the whole problem, right? That's why we are getting to the main point here, that people can only learn language by themselves, as you said, when they spend concentrated time with it by themselves. And that's why I decided I cannot keep begging my students, because I taught English for 10 years, right? But I always beg them, please do this in your free time. It will help you a lot. And then the students would always say like, yeah, we'll do. Of course. Yeah. Oh, I should, right? I will. And then the next lesson, it would be the same thing again. Like they kind of felt like they're doing me a favor if they do it. So I needed to turn this upside down and say, no, you're learning. I'm not paid to be teaching you, but I can help you on the way, right?
On that note, that brings us to the end of part one. How would you summarize this in one sentence then, Lydia?
I would say there's no such thing as teaching someone a language. You can only learn it by yourself.
That doesn't bode well for my website, does it? I will teach you a language.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Anyway, let's.
No, okay, just to put it right, I'm not against the concept of teaching, just the meaning of what teach means. Because your website could be, I will teach you how to learn a language, but that would be too long,
because
right?
too many words in that.
Right.
Sentence, yeah.
So no, I am not against teachers or teaching in general. I just think their role should change, as we've mentioned, because we have the internet and so many resources and possibilities. So it's just about the mindset.
All right, that was part one of this conversation here with Lydia. We will see you in part two. Don't go anywhere.
Can't wait.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. And here at Story Learning, everything that I do is powered by stories, whether that's writing books, teaching lessons, crafting courses. My mission is to help everyone succeed at learning a new language through the power of story. And we now have comprehensive language courses in over 15 languages, from Spanish to French, Korean to Japanese, and across all levels from beginner to mastery. And you can take a 7-day free trial of any of these programs by visiting storylearning.com/courses. I've poured my heart and soul into creating these courses over the last 10 or so years, and we've helped tens of thousands of new students achieve their dreams of learning a new language, all through the power of story. So go ahead and take a free trial. There's no commitment. You can try out our method for free, see if this can also be the breakthrough for you that it's been for so many other people. storylearning.com/courses.